technology company that focuses on solving some of the biggest pain points that everybody has in their daily lives. We are kind of tinkerers, hackers, IoT specialists. What we do on a day-to-day basis is work with enterprise clients as well as venture-backed companies to partner to come up with ways to take ideas for apps and to turn them into impactful digital products. We do a lot of business around robotics, Internet of Things technologies, as well as fintech. And there's nothing that we love more than pushing and pulling data in real time and turning hardware products into living, breathing, smart pieces of technology. Rob, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you. He is my co-founder, CTO, and the tech brains behind a lot of the cool stuff that we create day in, day out. Tonight, he's going to be talking into Internet of Things, and security is one of the main concerns that we have. He is an ethical hacker by trade, and without further ado, come on down.
Thanks. Wow. Applause. So, just to fill you in, I did this presentation at IoT World recently, so we're repeating a little bit of the background on the company and everything else there. So if we can get the screen up, that would be really handy. It's just me in... It's got a little delay. There we go. We'll work with the delay. So when I did this at IoT World, I made sure there was no one from Netflix in the audience because of the whole thing was themed as Internet of Scary Things and obviously Stranger Things theme. Hopefully no one's watching me or going to sue me for that. So just a little bit of background about myself. Before I did this, I've had two security companies. The first one was an ethical hacking company where I literally had a gang of 30 people sitting there trying to break into things all day long, right? So they're just sitting there testing systems. We got asked to break into them. We weren't just randomly breaking into things. And that was in the UK, and we grew that company, and eventually it got acquired. And then I set up another security company looking after high net worth individuals and their security. And then eventually, like anything, I know it sounds weird, I got bored breaking into things and breaking them. So I wanted to try and make things instead, and that's how we got into the software development world. We've got a little lag, which I'll have to try and account for on the screen. There we go. So, as Mark sort of mentioned, we founded Dogtown Media. We're a mobile app development company based in Venice. And we're working with IoT vendors on a daily basis to try and create mobile applications that work with their IoT devices, but always with the security in the mindset, and that's why we decided to do the presentation today, to show a little bit about some of the current problems there are with IoT and some remedies for that. So I need to get better at clicking before I finish what I'm saying. This is a new presenting skill set. So I wanted to address really the headlines I'm seeing, and I don't know if you guys have seen this in the press recently. The technical press are really focusing on IoT, right? It's the next thing that they're going to write about. The end of the world, this stuff's going to be inside your home. Hackers are going to get hold of it. The world's coming to an end. Now, if you've been in the security industry for 20 years, you'll see there's a pattern where they move between things that they want to basically scare you about. And the current one is IoT, And so I wanted to look at some of the stuff that's happened and why, there is this current interest in it, and why suddenly IoT is the security target, if you like. So what happened? Why has IoT suddenly become such a prevalent security topic in the press? So Mirai happened, okay? It was a worm, an internet virus that happened in September 2016. It basically infected in the hundreds of thousands of devices on the internet. And then they got hold of, admin access to these devices, and then they targeted other people's websites, flooding them with traffic, and basically taking them offline. Again, we'll just wait for the slide there. The setup for it is a little bit complicated, as the next diagram will show you. Okay, so there was various components to this, and what I wanted to do is get the code for it, put it down and show people how it works, because I felt like that might be an interesting topic to see how these botnets and these internet exploits work, and make it in a sort of digestible way. So that's what I did. Now, when I first sat down with the code, and the developer of this botnet put the code up on the internet for other people to use, he made his money by selling access to it so people could take out e-commerce sites and the like, and then he moved on and put the code onto the internet. So I downloaded it, and what I realized very quickly, that this thing starts spraying out onto the internet the moment you start running it, and that it was the potential for me to start infecting things on the internet, right? So I thought, well, what we'll do is, instead of running this you know, in a live environment, I'd make a mini internet and a mini botnet, and that's what I did with this little thing sitting on the desk here. This is my botnet in a box. Okay, so this is some Raspberry Pi devices that, you know, you'd find in a lot of IoT devices. And we've got 5 of them here, and they're connected via a Wi-Fi network to through my phone to my laptop. So we can basically get this botnet running in a local way, and I'm not going to infect anyone's hosts on the internet. And because it was scary, this thing spreads really quickly and it moves really quickly. And I set it up on my home PC and was playing around with it, and I was like, I'm gonna like end up starting like an outbreak on the web. So that's when I decided to bring it locally and just build this little network. So I just want to go through and explain as much as I can in layman's terms how this works. Now, this is going to be interesting with the delay. We'll see how this goes. See how far you guys are behind me. A few seconds.
If you really need to, you can unplug it and plug the television in.
Yeah, I think the delay is going to be a little bit problematic on this, because as I'm typing, things need to happen. So
Okay, if you want to unplug it, and
yeah.
then I'll just get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. It's like the Matrix. Yeah, it doesn't actually look like that on my screen. So, hi, how are you? No worries. There we go. That looks good. So there's basically 3 components to the code and the botnet, and we'll go through each one and show you how it comes together. The first bit we'll look at is the command and control center. So whoever created this tool wanted other people to buy access from him, right? And then be able to do distributed denial of service attacks on other sites. So he created, or I'm presuming it's a guy, he or she created the CNC, which is the command and control center. Okay, this runs on top of Linux, and then we can connect to it from another machine. Now, does anyone speaks Russian here? Because it's got Russian prompt on it. Okay. So this is the login. So as a subscriber to this botnet, this is what I would have seen to log in, and I would have been given a password to do that, a username and password. Because I'm running it locally, I set it up. Okay. I asked someone in the audience at IoT World, and they said it's something to do with like hot dogs. Like I like ketchup on my hot dog or something like that. But yeah, I couldn't really hear them properly. Right. So we're now connected to the command and control center. If we do a question mark here, we can see which attacks I can launch against people. Okay, so I could potentially start, taking out web servers and the like. There's only one problem. Right now, I've got 0 bots connected. Okay, so I haven't taken over any IoT devices. I haven't spread this yet. So at the moment, this is just an admin interface to a hacker tool. So we need to go and take over some of our IoT devices over here. So the second bit, or second part of it, is the loader tool. okay? And what this does is you need just one target to begin with that you can find, and you'll know you can brute force it and find the credentials to log in, okay? And now this attack uses something really simple, which is it goes and finds Linux embedded devices with something called BusyBox installed, which is just a suite of tools, and it logs it. It tries different usernames and passwords to log in. And then once it manages to log in, it uses that device to start searching the internet for other devices to hack. So I've got one device to begin with that we're going to basically load up this hacker code onto, and that'll be our first bot in the network. And this is all the bit that during the presentations I'm like worried about, because occasionally it doesn't connect like then. So we'll try that again. Sometimes I just have to restart it quickly, because once it gets going, it floods the mini network here, and it's kind of like causes a few problems. Yeah, let's just try and restart this quickly. It comes back online pretty quickly. Okay, so this is going to try different usernames and passwords on one of these devices, and once I've messed with it, so it's going to find a username and password. It will log in, upload the hacker tools, and start basically looking for other devices to hack. And this is exactly why I did this locally instead of on the internet, because it spreads so quickly. So it takes a few seconds. I think it will work this time. 3. Do you know what network are we connected to? Oh, we're just connected to the wrong network. There we go. That would help. There we go. That'll work now. Oh yeah, it says connections. Okay, take a few seconds, and right now it's uploading code to this. It's logged in, and it will be uploading code to this IoT device, exactly like the bot will have done. Take a few seconds more. While that's loading, is there any questions so far about what we've got?
Goal of the hack? What is the person trying to accomplish?
He's trying to take over all these IoT devices, so he can then control them to do a denial of service attack on someone's website. So literally hundreds of thousands of these devices, and he can say, right, I want you now to go and attack so-and-so's website, and they'll start firing packets at it and just take it offline, which is exactly what in the real world happened. First of all, they took over this security researcher's website that had talked about the hack, and then they went on to take out various institutions after this.
So yeah, it's like we were talking earlier, your Netflix goes down. That's can't be watching scary thing.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask. So actually, we're gonna go to this later, but is there, and if there is, what is the system in place on BusyBox or whatever?
Yeah.
Whatever device is trying to get into, that would be in place to stop this. I know.
Yeah.
The basic one is lockout after failed login attempts.
Right. Yeah. So we'll go through that. Actually, I've got a whole bunch of slides on basic stuff. Yeah, we can do. So if we, and again, this is super small, so I've got this thing here. You can see now we've got one bot's connected, right? So we've taken over one device. That thing talks back to our command and control center and says, right, I'm here and I'm ready to use, okay? And what it then starts doing is looking across the internet, or in our case, our little network, our pretend internet here, and it starts looking for other things to take over. And there's another tool on here that collects all that information called Scan Listen. So this is the device that we took over, which is .4, sending back the password and usernames of other things that it's broken into. So in the short time that it's been running, it's pretty much broken into every other device on this mini network here, brute forced it through Telnet and found the username and password, and now it's reporting back to us. Okay, so we have got what you would do in the real world. You'd send this out, just sit there and wait for it to collect all these IPs and all this information, right? And we haven't taken over those other boxes yet. we've basically just got the username and password to log into them. So I'm just gonna kill that because the network goes haywire as soon as it does that, and it starts sending huge amounts of traffic. So what we're going to do now, we've got all the IP addresses and usernames and passwords of all the other devices that one found. We're going to infect the bot onto those devices as well. So it's the same procedure as before. We use this loader script that comes with the toolkit. Okay, and it's going to basically log into all these devices here, upload the back door, and they'll all connect back to my command and control center. And we should see, sometimes I get a couple, sometimes I get 5. It kind of depends on the on how my luck's doing that day. Let's see. But you can imagine in the real world, this is hundreds of thousands of devices all sitting there on the internet, basically connecting back to our command and control center. So you've got the power of 100,000, routers, printers, whatever devices it managed to get. Oh, good, I've got all 5 there. So you can see now I've got 5 bots connected. So that's all of my fake IoT devices here are now connecting back to my command and control center, which is in another, which one? That one here. Okay, so they're ready for me to basically attack a site. So it's a really cool. I mean, this guy made it user friendly because he's selling access of this to other people. So it kind of tells you how to use it. I'm going to do a flood attack against my own laptop because I just want you to see the bandwidth come in. And I tried to set up a website to take out locally, but I really needed more bots. But I need probably 10 or 20 of these all piled up. So if we look at the moment, I've got about 360 kilobytes a second coming in. We're going to do a SYN flood attack. So you can see down here, this is one of my options, SYN flood. I'm going to flood my own laptop. With packets. So I'm saying, flood this IP address. So this in the real world would be someone else's server, and flood it for 16 seconds. So if I set that running, they'll all be attacking basically my laptop now. And you can see that's gone up from whatever it was, 400 kilobits to 4.1 megabits of traffic now bombarding my laptop. And in the real world, that would be someone else's server, and if you've got 100,000 devices, you've just taken them offline. So it took me about 4 weekends to get that working because there's no instructions for it. But it's pretty scary that out in the real world, someone is selling access to this stuff to be able to take out your, corporate rival or your enemy's web server. Sorry,
Yeah,
Mark, go on.
question. So, because I remember when this happened.
Yeah.
I think it affected most of what I use, for half a day, maybe longer.
Yeah.
I didn't realize. I thought it was just one hacker doing that. So
Yeah.
you're saying he sold basically the admin dashboard.
Yeah. So
did anyone ever track down how many? Is it possible to track how many people purchased access to this?
Yeah.
How many players were there?
Right. So I don't think they ever managed to get. He didn't put this on his own. He didn't get a digital ocean, slice or something and put this on. He broke into other people's servers to put this on. Right, so there's no route back to him. It's not like, oh, this box seems to have a lot of traffic. He kind of was boasting about how he'd broken into other people's boxes to do this. And when you load it up, it says disguising itself and doing all this stuff. It doesn't actually. That bit doesn't work very well. If you look at the code, it's a mix of Go and C. And so he's kind of pulled bits from other people's code together in it. I think he wrote the Go bit, but the C bit is from something before. But yeah, basically this is financial gain. This is selling access so you can go and piss off someone by, taking out their website. And if you go on some of the hacker forums, there are open adverts on there for, please, I'm selling access to or buy this toolkit, basically, and you can go and buy it for however much. So yeah, that's why he created it. It's pure financial gain. And in the end, he was like, you know what? I'm done with this now. I'm moving on to the next thing.
He's an anarchist, being I just want to cause trouble.
Yeah. You know what? I think there's some of that goes on, but I think that in this instance it was pure financial gain. I mean, I don't think we'd have to be a rocket scientist to say it's probably Russian, seeing as the login is Russian, and the English in the files was, was definitely, a little off. So it was definitely, I think it probably was.
From your experience, does this feel like something that was organized by like a small streamlined team or like an indie type of operation?
Yeah, I think it was potentially one or a handful of people got together, made this, sold access to it, and then moved on. And they're probably professional hackers. They'll sit there and they'll do these things for financial gain. Looking at it, it looked like one person really that kept coming up in all the all the kind of forum stuff about it. But yeah, it could have been a couple of people. But yeah, this is sometimes someone's full-time job to make stuff to break other people's web servers.
How do they get paid afterwards?
Sorry?
How do they get paid?
Bitcoins.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they disappear into the ether with their bitcoins, or wherever the new one is, Ethereum or whatever that one's seems to be going through the roof at the moment. So I thought that was a good peek inside the world of hacking and these kind of toolkits and the sort of damage that they can do. And as I said, I just wanted to do it in a little enclosed environment, basically, because it spread really quickly.
So how does the algorithm find the next device to infect?
Yeah, it's really simple. It just does random IP.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it just sprays across the internet, hoping to connect to something.
Does it at least keep track of the list of already found it?
Yeah. So it does. Yeah, it won't do the same one twice.
Okay.
So I in the code I just edited it to use my 192 network on here.
So that's how you
Yeah, because otherwise it would take actually it didn't even do 192s. It excluded what's the word I'm looking for? Private ranges. Yeah. So and oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, there's some more beer in the kitchen. That's not cold enough. So what I wanted to really sort of carry on with is, there was a lot of panic and hysteria, as there always is, around security and hacking. The press articles are like, the next panic. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, and then some of the measures that you can put in place to stop this sort of thing happening, or at least stop some of these kind of things happening. Also, I just put in here about security fatigue, because I certainly feel this. I don't know if you guys do. When people talk about security, it is non-stop bad news. So-and-so's been hacked, their car's been hacked, my house has been hacked, this, that, and the other. And it gets to the point where you're almost like, so what? There's so much bad news around. And I wanted to kind of just talk a little bit about that, and how, there are things you can do, how the majority of hacks, from my experience, are pretty basic. They use, default passwords, like in this case. If you left your router with root and admin on it, you can kind of expect that it's going to get hacked, right? The 90%+ of hacks are really simple, or other people's code that are just used, okay? They're not these uber hackers sitting there. So there is something you can do about it, and if you address some basic points, you're going to get a lot of these sort of things sorted out. Okay. Just one thing as well, put on the front of this, that these are simple steps. If you're looking, to secure your IoT devices for a product or a service, then get security people involved. Get them to test the systems out. This is not, a supplement for decent security advice. This is just, some common things I've found over the years. Number one, and this again, you would think would be pretty simple, but is not in the real world, which is, until recently, if you bought a Raspberry Pi, it had SSH enabled to log in, and it had Raspberry and Pi as a username and password. And they just changed that recently. So you would think that out the box, things would be secured in a way that they don't have default accounts on them, and they're not. I mean, we just saw hundreds of thousands of devices get hacked. So, simple things like getting rid of default accounts, changing the password, changing the actual username as well where you can.
So the question is this smart enough to use any kind of fingerprinting, TCP step fingerprinting or something to speed up the attack, be more efficient?
Yeah, well, what it felt like to me, that well, I keep saying he, it could be a girl, he or she, basically took other people's code and put it in here. A lot of the network code was not the same as the Go code that was in there. It felt like it had been reused. And yeah, it did. It basically looked at the device, decided whether it was ARM, Intel, PowerPC, and then it basically changed its attack for that. Not in a super sophisticated way, but it did do that. And it only uploaded the binaries that matched the device it was hacking. So there was a little bit of that.
And it was doing the fingerprinting before it was in? From the TCP
Yeah, I think. Yeah, well, first of all, first thing it did was actually, if you had Telnet with one of the default credentials on there, just a Debian box with no BusyBox or anything else, didn't work. It only worked with BusyBox. So I think it did something through BusyBox where it then was able to fingerprint the device. Whether or not it was doing anything like an Nmap type of fingerprint, I don't think so. Yeah, I think once it managed to, I think probably get in through BusyBox, it then found out what the system was.
Yeah, once you're in the BusyBox, you're home free.
Yeah, I mean, you have everything, yeah.
Brief explanation of fingerprinting?
Oh,
What do you mean by fingerprinting?
yeah.
Okay, so TCP stack is a very complex thing. TCP stack, and there are a lot of different characteristics. Each manufacturer does things a little bit differently as far as sequence numbers and other things, and so people collect databases of these traits so they can identify it. There's a well-known utility called Nmap that will do that. It'll make a best guess.
Yeah.
On the land, you can also just look at the MAC address. That will tell you something about the manufacturer of the Ethernet chip.
So yeah, when we did more ethical hacking, the first thing you would do is enumerate the network, and you try and figure out, is this a Linux box? Is it Windows? Is it running Apache? If it's Apache, it's probably a Linux box. And there's like different ways that you could go about fingerprinting the server and the services, and then take that information to launch an attack. But probably Nmap is the de facto tool for that, and it's free download. It's been around for literally forever, and it will do a really good job of fingerprinting stuff. Often it might say Windows 7, 10, a few things together, but usually if you look at the services, you can then figure out what it is. So again, this is really simple advice, but not always taking up, as we've just seen. Have you guys ever logged on to a site called Shodan at all? So you can basically, what they've done is they've scanned the internet, and they've port scanned everything on the internet to find out what's out there. So you can go and see all these devices that are sitting there on the web, and you can see the login ports for them. And then a lot of the time you can say, just show me like this, I want to look for this type of DVR device, and it will go and find it by the banner on the SSH server or Telnet or something. So yeah, it's pretty. I'm not connected to the internet because I'm connected to this little network, but we can maybe have a look afterwards. It's pretty crazy, and there's still hundreds of thousands of Telnet devices out there even after this. So don't put things directly on the internet where you have to. So why are all these things not in a small home network or business network? Why are they just whacked on a public IP address? Okay, and the chances are most of the time is access, someone somewhere needs to access it. Okay, but there's now better ways to control and access devices over the internet without having them directly on the internet. We've used a few different IoT environments. One of I was using Amazon's recently. It uses MQTT over WebSockets, which is a protocol to allow you to control an IoT device, but from inside a network. So this thing is kind of like keeping a keep alive to the outside world. But if you're coming inbound from the internet, you're not going to basically be able to detect that. So, this has got a lot easier recently. Like this stuff used to be more difficult, and why people maybe left administrative ports open. Now there's different ways to access things that should make it a little bit easier. So if you've got something like one of these devices running on an internal network, you're not going to be able to see it from the internet. So obviously, just putting things on a public IP address. I did my first pen test. I did ethical hack about 15 plus years ago. They put their entire company network on the internet. It was like every workstation in the entire company, hundreds of them, with a public IP address. Now, I doubt you'll find that as much these days, but that was like my first test, and I was like, this is ridiculous. I got a week and like 200 hosts to test, you know, like, so you don't find that, and I think over time we'll see less ports open to the internet and insecure ports like Telnet, FTP, those kind of things, which are a little bit a relic of the past, but still widely used. So get rid of unnecessary services. So when you buy these Linux boards or these IoT devices, a lot of the time they're running services that you won't need, things like, you know, file transfer service, Telnet. Sometimes you might not need SSH. And we talked about Nmap before, and it's like, Nmap, you know, put this device on your network and run an Nmap scan, and it will show you what's open, and it will show you if there's ports on there and services that you just don't need. That's exactly what an ethical hacker does at the start of, or a normal hacker, at the start of their test, is they run these tools to find out how you can attack something. And the chances are that there'll be something open that isn't necessary. So it's closing those things down to make sure that, you know, they're not available to everyone and they're not vulnerable. So firewalling it, again, you buy it, the Raspberry Pi out the box, there's no firewall enabled. It's a 2-second job to enable it, but again, these IoT boards are coming out the factory without firewalls running on them. No advice on configuring that out the box. And if you put a firewall up, you know, everyone knows what a firewall is now. Everyone knows you need to have one, right? But they're still putting these boards out and putting these devices out where you can just connect to ports and services on them if you put them directly on the internet. So if these devices had had a firewall and been, you know, had Telnet filtered off, then we wouldn't be able to see them, we wouldn't be able to hit them, and therefore we wouldn't be able to hack them. So again, it's like simple stuff you would think, but not happening a lot of the time. Encryption, so basically using it. Telnet, which is what we hacked through here, is clear text. If you've got a network sniffer, you'd be able to see the username and password going through it. That's why, you know, it's considered a protocol of the past, if you like. SSH, other protocols are encrypted. If you're on a wireless network, you won't, you know, and you were sniffing it, you wouldn't be able to see the username and the password go through. Also, you know, can you use any encryption on the device itself? Can you encrypt your data in some way that, you know, if someone gets hold of the device, they can't pull out your IP or other pertinent information about the user? And again, we see that a lot where if you start looking at the device itself, there's unencrypted data on there and data that you could potentially use in a hack. So, you know, authentication, so an authorization, so logging in basically. Do you want a username and password on these devices? Probably not. If you're going to roll out an IoT framework, you want to be using like certificates to make sure that your devices and other people can't log into them. You know, you don't want someone sitting there trying to guess your passwords. You want to have a system where that's not even an option, right? It uses certificates. It uses well-known secure frameworks to be able to, you know, for you as an admin or the network to log into these devices remotely without someone, you know, actually physically typing in a password. And there's things that are around that are great for doing that and have been around for years, but again, people rush to market and just put things on the internet with, you know, logins and web logins open and all these kind of things. Disable physical ports. So this is, you know, a good example at DEF CON. I don't know if you saw this one where they hacked an ATM, right, on stage, and the way they did it, there was an unused USB port on it, and they plugged the USB in, it auto ran an exploit, and they managed to hack the ATM because the developers had just left on the USB port. They don't use it, it was just on the kit that they have. So if you disable those, if you you know, physically or in software, preferably physically, you're not going to be able to get to it, you know. So if this is in our IoT device that we've made, and we've got all these USB ports, and we've got an Ethernet port here. If someone manages to get into it, crack the lid open or whatever, can they just easily access the device and find your code and run whatever code they have on it? So again, like that's if you can do that, either don't have the ports on there or disable them.
That was the 2004 election, Debo machines, Debbie Harris.
Oh right, was it?
Yeah, how simple, just an open USB port.
Right. Oh yeah. There's- yeah, it's. I mean, there's that. They're great. You know, example things like voting machines and things like that as well. You know, like they probably secured the software, but if you manage to get into the case somewhere, you'll probably be able to get into it. Yeah, and you're done. Another one is, you know, auto updates. Like, how can you update this thing you've got out on the internet, this IoT device? Not always easy. Can you get your users to update it? Can you auto update it? Because the moment it leaves the factory, the moment it's out of date, and the software is going to be vulnerable, you know, 2 weeks later to some new vulnerability that's come out. If you follow the security industry and vulnerability research, it's just endless, right? Someone's finding a new way to hack things, and the only way that you're going to potentially keep on top of that is updates. Now, a great example we just had was the worm that it's gone out of my mind, the Windows one that just happened, the WannaCrypt, yeah, one that just spread. It was on the news, and it basically, out of date Windows machines, it took them over and encrypted information on there, and then someone was supposed to pay to get their information back. Why did that happen? Well, first of all, there's no firewall, obviously, in these boxes, or it did actually get inside the internal network, but they hadn't been updated, right? If they'd been updated, it wouldn't have happened. It's not as easy if you've got 500 workstations that you've got to update. You know, it takes time, and you can't just do it, but, it hit huge numbers of servers because they didn't have that current update on there. This is again, more of a hardware one, but what happens a lot of the time with security researchers is they'll find a IoT device, they'll start pulling it apart, and they can mess with or upload their own firmware, you know, which is the software that runs on the device. And there's a good example where American farmers are uploading their own firmware to Ukrainian firmware to their tractors because they, you know, the software they have is too restrictive, so they want to run their own firmware. So there's things that you can do from a hardware point of view to, I wouldn't say completely prevent, but make it more difficult for people to upload their own firmware onto your device, and therefore, you know, potentially do something that you don't want it, or act in a way that you don't want it to act. And then 10 is like permissions. You know, a lot of the hacks you see, servers are running as root, as admin. So if you hack that server, you've then got admin on the box. Okay, so there's lots of things that you can do, particularly it's easy with Linux, you know, to isolate off services and make sure that if someone breaks into a particular service, you know, like a web server or an FTP server, they can't rampage through the rest of the operating system and do whatever they want. They're kind of locked in that environment. And again, that's something that should happen, but doesn't happen pretty regularly, like the majority of the time, if you start doing sort of security assessments on these. So that's my kind of top 10 of basic IoT stuff. Obviously, there's, you know, if someone really wants to hack an IoT device, they could spend months or years doing it. And these are only like my top 10 basic tips, but I think that would stop like 90% of the worms and the, you know, the basic hacks that are out there. So, any questions? And I'll whiz through that slightly.
So how secure is the nuclear industry from hacking?
The what, sorry?
Nuclear industry.
Well, yeah, I'd say one of my first jobs, as we used to do social engineering, which is, you know, walking into a building and seeing how far we get, was a nuclear facility. And we got in and were in there for an hour walking around, picking up folders and documents, and walked out of there again an hour later with bagfuls of stuff. And we plugged into their network as well, did a scan of their network. So that was 10 years ago, and that caused a shitstorm, as you can imagine, in that company. But do you know what? We went in and we couldn't figure a clever way to go in. And we said we had an appointment with someone. And then we said, oh, can I use the toilet while I'm here? And while they were looking for this person, we walked off into the building, and then she must have forgotten about us. And we walked around in basically, the offices of a nuclear facility for hours, or an hour.
That is
Yeah.
always the hills. Can
Yeah, I mean, I still can't believe it. Well, quite honestly. So I've done a bit of work with SCADA systems before, you know, so industrial control units and things like that. And a lot of the time they're not near the internet, but sometimes they are, and when they are, they're not very secure. I hope that the nuclear industry have got this stuff locked down and segregated. But I mean, another good example, and I forget the name of the virus, but they found that what looks like the US government was trying to get to break Iranian centrifuges on nuclear devices, and they created a worm to do that, and it worked, and they managed to get into the internal systems and break. They found that if they could run the centrifuges at a certain frequency, they would break apart, or and so they managed, and so that they found that virus and sort of pulled it back and analysed it as much as possible. So there are obviously systems that are connected there somewhere. I mean, I've worked in these industries. I've worked on a nuclear submarine for a little while, and that certainly wasn't connected in any way to the internet.
Didn't Stuxnet propagate through a USB?
Was it USB, right?
Yeah, it had to be internal.
Right.
I recall the story. It was the USB that they brought in
Right.
to the lab, but it did break centrifuges.
So that's like air gap, you know. So they were not going to put this on the internet, but then someone picks up a USB or gets sent one in the mail and plugs it into an internal network PC, and then it basically spreads through the network. So yeah, I mean, I presume a lot of this stuff is security. I had security clearance in the UK, and I worked in some of these places. Some of them are very highly secure, but I think, you know, like the NSA just got hacked, right, and a lot of their exploits stolen. So you would presume they would be secure. So unless it was an internal person, you know, So yeah, hopefully no one's going to set off any nuclear explosions. You know, working in that environment, it's good. It's better than most, but it's not, you know, completely secure. Nothing is really. Yeah, no worries. Any other questions at all?
Where did the name Mirai come from?
Yeah, I don't know. It is a car as well. I don't know where they got it. Yeah, got it from. And I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it properly because I've never heard anyone else say it. But yeah, I don't know. That was just what it's called. You know, and all the code, which is quite neatly organised, is all in a folder called Mirai.
How'd you get the code?
They posted it on GitHub. So the person who made it put it onto one of the security forums, and then someone else put it onto their GitHub, and it had like basic instructions, and I thought, oh, this is a doddle, I'll do this in an afternoon, and it took me about 4 or 5 Saturday afternoons to get it working, because there were bits of it that just didn't have any instructions, and one really annoying thing that was so simple, but it just took me a while to work out.
Is that code still being utilized to create hacks?
Yeah, like literally a month later, someone had changed their exploit in it to use a web server instead of Telnet, and it was using it to attack sites again, or using it to break into other IoT devices. So they're just repurposing the vulnerability and using it again, which is kind of crazy. And then there's, I'm sure, more on the way. You know, I've watched on a little bit. Actually, we can look at that. See if I can get on the internet. On Shodan, let's just bring that up. I've seen the number of vulnerable systems, or ones that are running some of these services, come down a little bit. But there's still a lot out there. So this is the tool that maps the internet. So you can go out and find, I forget the search terminology, it'll probably, so you can search for like Telnet, for instance, which is the port that we just used. And all it's doing with this, actually, I think you can actually search for Telnet port, but you know, there's 200,000 just straight off there. It's found around the world, and you can see which countries it's found the most in. So there's 200 potentially vulnerable Telnet hosts there.
How does it go and crawl the web to find these guys?
It literally it's just a port scanner, like we talked about Nmap before. It's a different one that they use for this, but it will go to every IP address on the internet and run a scan on it and send the data back. And they built a really quick port scanner. There's a few around to do that.
So if you're a hacker, you just basically crawl
Yeah, it's like,
That's all the data you need.
yeah, I've got a vulnerability for so and so server. How many can I find? Well, I'll go and let's have a look. Okay, so this is people that have actually named their Raspberry Pi Raspberry, or I've got that in the telnet data. But there's 600. There's a lot more than that out there. I just can't remember the search terminology. Let's just drill down into one of these.
Where's Raspberry the password? Pi is the.
Oh, it's just seeing that in a banner basically that it's presenting. So that works. So this is the ports it found open. So it's running a web server, and you can see there it's got Apache. It's running. This is like an out the box. Mind you, it's got DNS on there, so probably not. But it's like SSH that you connect in with. It's running a web server. So someone's probably, and I think it's okay for us to connect to this with, as long as we're not trying to break in, we're just having a look. There'll be a web server running on this device. Okay, it's got a username and password on there. So someone's put this on the internet for whatever reason, right? It could be an IoT device. It could be just like their home media server or something like that. And this scan has come along and picked it up and found that it's out there. That one's in Italy, but you're absolutely right. You can look for anything on here, and it will potentially find thousands.
So if you wanted to, you could turn these devices against that one and knock it offline.
Yeah. So if you got enough of them, you could then take off, offline this other stuff. You could target. I don't know who these people are. There's a lot of telecom companies on here that put their stuff on there. Okay, there's only 4 of those, but you could, focus on this particular organization. So a lot of these things will have already been hacked, This one's a Cisco router, so you could search for Cisco if you had a Cisco vulnerability. So this thing just sits there, and I don't know how the inner workings of it are working, but I presume it's scanning most of the time, and they would have a series of servers looking for IP addresses.
So how does a web server defend against that from their perspective?
Well, yeah, I mean.
Somebody else has their password.
They've got a series of ports open there. So if you couldn't get in through the web server, you might try one of the other ones, FTP or SSH, or they had DNS, domain name service open as well. So it just shouldn't be on the internet without a firewall.
You're saying like whatever these things are all teaming up to attack, right? So they're trying to set on a site.
Yeah. So we potentially could use this as part of our botnet to take down someone else's site if it's vulnerable.
So I'm saying how is that other site defended if there's
From the other point of view.
Yeah.
So not always can be defended, but there's services like Cloudflare and Akamai which do distributed hosting. So they will, instead of having one web server with one IP address, if you look at it from the UK or the US, it'll have different IP addresses. So they attack one thing and then it will be distributed from somewhere else. Honestly, I feel like if you've got enough of them, you're probably going to overwhelm whatever it is. But I use Cloudflare personally for some sites and stuff, and it's pretty good, but I've never tested it like that.
And once the CDN gets big, they can collect a lot of intelligence and be very predictive.
Yeah, I imagine there's some clever stuff going on in the background. Yeah.
Squash it.
Yeah.
The guy pops up here and pops up over there. They recognize him. So it's supposed to have enough data.
I was running a SYN flood attack, which is just basically like a series of TCP packets. So that if it was clever, the network would say, well, this guy is doing nothing but sending TCP SYN packets at me. He's done it 10 times in a row. We'll cut him off. So they're intelligent in that way.
Just ignores it completely.
Yeah. But I mean, you do see still big organisations get hurt and taken over by these things, and get taken offline because they might target something else as well, like DNS servers or so they stop resolving the DNS or the URLs or whatever. So yeah, there's different ways to go about it.
When you say one of these gets taken offline, that means they're taken offline while the attack is happening, and when the attack ends, they're fine?
Generally, yeah, like it would. Again, sometimes the server might need a reboot or whatever, but generally they'll pop back up because all it's doing is just like literally flood of information and it can't respond to everything. So eventually it just stops responding. But sometimes if you, yeah, as soon as it's over, they'll come back up again and start responding. Sometimes the server will just like have some memory issue and like have to be rebooted or something. But yeah, most of the time it will come up.
So for these everyday devices that get sort of put into this bot network,
Yeah.
while they're in this bot network and actively being used, is there something that like would be noticeable to us if we're using these devices?
Probably only that they were slow, you know, or they become unresponsive.
Like slow Wi-Fi or something.
Yeah.
That's actually being used.
Yeah, you would, you know, like it was. I kind of skipped that bit actually, but it was a lot of like DVRs and IP cameras. And things like that. So if you were on those, then you'll probably notice that your IP camera wasn't streaming properly, or it wouldn't stream. And this is cleared off with a reboot. As soon as you reboot it, it's gone. It stops. You know, it basically doesn't come back at reboot. So you can, you know, as soon as their power recycled, they're back to normal.
So if you suspect one of your devices as being compromised, just change the password.
Yeah. So I mean, like, ideally you just wipe it and start again, you know, because you don't know what's on there. And if any in the past, if I've ever had any suspicions that any of my stuff has, you know, had anyone access it, I just wipe it and, you know, start again. With this, in this instance, yeah, reboot, change the passwords on it, put the firewall on, and chances are you'd probably be alright. But I never take the chance, because once someone's on, there could be something lurking in the background.
Yeah.
I only had it once where I like knew it was happening. And it was just really bad timing. I was speaking to a guy called Chris over email, and someone sent me a phishing email from Chris in the middle of that conversation, and we were sending links to each other. And I clicked the link, and it downloaded like something onto my laptop and started sending information out to somewhere on the. So I just turned it off and wiped it. But yeah, it was just bad timing, that one. But yeah, honestly, the advice would be, if you think that something's been hacked, then, you know, put the operating system back on, you know, get your data off, put the operating start again, because it's the only way you'll know that it's okay.
And if you were backing up your data in that instance, how do you make sure you're clean? You know?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Taking the virus with you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you have to rely on virus scanners, and they do a pretty good job, but they're not always perfect. You know, there's things that get around them. So you do have to rely on that a little bit, you know. And most of my stuff is on like Drive and Dropbox and things like that, and so I have to rely on the fact that, you know, nothing in there was necessarily compromised, and that my antivirus scanners pick that up. But you don't know. I mean, even as someone that's worked in security for as long as I have, unless I sat there all day looking at what ports are open and the network traffic out of my machine and analysing it, or I don't know that, you know, someone is necessarily on there. You just have to do what you can. And I'm sure, yeah, if there was like the NSA or one of these security agencies wanted to get on my stuff, they could do. Yeah, it's true. It's definitely difficult. But that, sorry, go on.
In your past lifetime as a hacker, what were some of the biggest vulnerabilities you've found and exploited?
So, like, the nuclear site was a good one. One of the first tests I did was a credit card company, and we got like root access from the outside onto their servers, and they had credit card numbers on there, unencrypted, and people like, that was crazy, and then people got fired over that one. And yeah, I worked on, you know, I worked in interesting environments, nuclear submarines and facilities. I worked for GCHQ, which is like the Pentagon of the UK, and, you know, you ride around in little carts underneath. It's like a James Bond film underneath it and stuff. It's pretty cool. So stuff like that. Yeah, I found that more than anything that the IoT and connected devices is the most fun stuff, you know. I got to test a internet connected coffee machine way before people were thinking of doing that, you know, and it's like, that's a good day. You know, we managed to take it offline and DOS it, and we tested internet, basically traffic lights that were connected as a backup via the internet, and that was fun. So that sort of thing is always, yeah, always fun.
So what you're saying is that each one of these traffic lights is connected to the internet and could be manipulated?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know with this kind of stuff. They might have a GSM, like a phone signal and that connects back to base.
The network actually that runs the traffic signals is a serial network that runs through conduit.
Right.
Signal to signal, it's like a peer-to-peer network.
Uh-huh.
It's actually not networked at all.
Oh, okay. So they don't like GSM it to the outside world or
No.
anything, right?
It's all protected by conduit under the
Yeah,
tree,
it's
so-
probably a good way to do
Yeah,
it. You know.
it's like technology from the 80s
Yeah.
that they're using.
Yeah.
So that couldn't be hacked.
But it doesn't fail, so
Yeah.
they never really.
Well, yeah.
Can be hacked.
A cable's a
Yeah,
pretty
physical
good way of
access.
doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that was I think the ones we looked at were temporary traffic lights. So you put at roadworks, and I think so that's why they were trying to connect them up in that way.
So that part in person of interest where the guy at the main machine turns all the lights green so that you get, that was fake.
Theoretically, it's possible if they can get access to the control center.
Uh-huh.
Because they have buildings where they control all the stoplights remotely. If they could get access to the computers that control the whole network, they could
Doesn't it
theoretically
show
do
the
that.
guy
but
hacks that computer to change
in the
traffic?
box,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's doable, yeah.
So they're all
It's
connected,
actually-
it's just through a serial instead of the internet?
I'm pretty sure it's a
Hardware?
serial network that they're running.
Yeah.
That's the same for I heard that the parking meters in Santa Monica now are all connected to the internet.
Right.
So is that
Yeah.
like a
That's a
Yeah.
radio sim, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. That would be, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you can get on those networks, you could feasibly do something.
These are
Search
the
parking
normal-
meter on there.
But the one the one in the UK years ago had if you were a local, you could get a card and you put it in the machine and you got money off. So we duplicated them. We got a card reader and just made like a bundle of them, so we could use them locally, and my mum could use one and stuff. But times have moved on a little bit from card stripe readers. But yeah, it was quite fun. Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming down. A little hot in here. Was it me?
It's warm.
Is that
Hard up there.
a
It's
little noisy? Yeah.
That was really interesting, Ron.
Cool. Thanks. Appreciate that.